This is Sarah Connelly's video blog series, helping you accelerate your collective and personal transformation with systemic intelligence.
The systemic levels of conscience really stem from first understanding what does conscience mean, because conscience is really about our moral sense of right or wrong. So there's three levels of conscience. There's the personal level, which really relates to our own personal values and our sense of right and wrong based on our own point of reference. Then there's the collective conscience, which is the collective set of values and the sense of right and wrong based on the survival of the collective. And you can sense that if the survival of the collective is priority, then it's very different from the survival of the individual. And then the third level is the universal level of conscience, which is the greatest sense of the whole, which would be, for instance, the whole of humanity. So if we think of those as almost intersecting circles, those are the three different levels of conscience. So how does that play out in a systemic sense? The Banking Royal Commission would be a really good example of that. Because if you look at it as a whole system, there's a universal level in terms of what's good for whole of humanity. There's a collective level, which is what's good for all of the different sectors of society. Whether it's the regulators, whether it's the government, whether it's the superannuation industry, whether it's the shareholders, whether it's the banking executives themselves. So there's lots of different collectives at play there. And then, of course, there's the individuals. So, what are the individuals' levels of conscience? That gets really interesting because if you think you're a banking executive, and so your level of conscience could be around your own personal survival. So your personal level of conscience would be at play. So you're making decisions based on what will influence your survival. Equally, the collective conscience could be at play. So this is why we talk a lot about culture, because if the collective conscience requires you to do things in order to survive, that means that, for instance, you can breach your personal conscience, but you do so in order to survive in the collective. So the collective conscience is having a big impact on you, or what you believe to be the collective conscience. So you can start to get a sense of the complexity involved with all these different levels of conscience. Now, if we try to address an issue at, say, the personal level of conscience, we're actually denying the forces at play in the collective. And a lot of those forces can act on us in a way that we don't even realise. So asking people to be accountable for that is actually quite a difficult thing for them to do in isolation. But then again, there's the collective responsibility, and this is where the more senior management and the board are certainly very responsible for how that is at play, but they can be operating from their personal conscience instead of a collective conscience. So hopefully this kind of reference to all these different consciences helps you start to be aware there's a level of complexity there that if we reduce it to simplicity, we won't actually solve the problem. We can create a solution which looks like a solution to the issues that at our personal or collective level we think are the dominant issues. But there are interactive dynamics at play from the different collectives. So it's not that simple. And by the way, it's not something that one single person can resolve. It's more something that needs to be resolved at a collective level. So that just gives you a window into some of the complexities when we're looking at systemic intelligence and what are the systemic forces at play. And I haven't even begun to touch on the universal forces that might be at play here that are, one of the questions we often ask when we look at these situations is, what is this a good solution for? And one could even say that crisis in the banking sector is a good solution for potentially for the imbalance there is in terms of the pressure on the banking system to produce profits to address things like superannuation needs, retirement needs, needs to acquire things at the lowest possible cost. There's lots of forces at play in our society that are being crystallised into this financial crisis. And it's interesting because we're seeing financial crises happening all around the world in lots of different ways. So it points to potentially there's something at play universally about our relationship with money and profits and how we distribute wealth. And so, who knows what's actually at play from a universal level. Those would be fascinating questions for us to explore if we really wanted to design a solution to a situation that was wise and insightful of the systemic forces.
How can understanding the systemic levels of conscience support your goals? Contact Sarah through ea@sarahcornally.com.